All right, today is Tuesday, September 24th, 2013, and we are interviewing Jim Spears at the Illinois State Library. Jim is 65 years old, having been born on 7/17 of 48, July 17th of 48. My name is Sue Burkholder, and I will be the interviewer. Jim, could you please state for the recording in what war and branch of service you served?
I served in the U.S. Army in the Vietnam War.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let's just start. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, and how you got to the point where you entered the Army?
I was born south of here in Pana, Illinois. Actually, my parents were actually in Nokomis, but Pana was the closest hospital. I'm the oldest of four brothers. We farmed down there when I was a kid, so I was outdoors a lot and hunted a lot, and it was good life. Really enjoyed it. My brothers and I still get along very good. My parents are both deceased, but like I said, we are very close as brothers. Whenever I was in high school, I got good grades. I never had any problem with that, but I had no great desire to go to college. And to be quite true with you, my dad really couldn't afford to send me to college and everything. And Vietnam was starting to really heat up at that point. So I assumed that sooner or later I was probably going to be drafted, because they were really starting to draft people pretty heavy in 1968. And I assumed I was going to be drafted. Some guys, small towns, people don't go to Canada to get away from the war. And we had a few guys that went into the Air Guard and the National Guard and everything, because the National Guard really, there was only a very few small number of troops that were from the National Guard that went to Vietnam, as compared to now, where all the National Guard units seem to go. But some of those went in because they wanted to avoid the draft, because again, people who were getting drafted were basically going to Vietnam, and that was there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. But I didn't really, I wasn't going to go to the Air Guard just for that. So I ended up being drafted in April of 1968, and ended up in the Army. Almost ended up in the Marines. They were drafting Army guys, and we got in a room, and I assumed I was going to be in the Army, and this was after taking the physical and passing the physical, and they came in and they said, hey, guess what? We're short our quote on Marines today. Said, does anybody want to be a Marine? Well, I definitely didn't want to be a Marine, and I'll be quite true, nobody else in that room wanted to be a Marine either. And so nobody volunteered. So he said, okay, he said, I'm going to pick some Marines here. And so he lined us up, and they pulled us by blood type. And A positive, B, whatever the blood types are, they went down until they got their 10. By the time they got to me, they already had an A positive, so I didn't have to go. So I was not a Marine, but I remember this one guy said, this sergeant come down, he said, son, you're a Marine? And he says, I'm a Marine. He said, well, I can't be a Marine. He said, my mom expects me to call her tomorrow night from Fort Leonard Wood. And he said, well, you'll be calling her, but it won't be from Fort Leonard Wood. And so he was a Marine. So I ended up in the Army that way. Yeah.
Okay. And how did your family feel about you going into the service?
My dad had been a World War II veteran in the Navy. And I'll be quite truthful with you, Vietnam was starting to get fairly hot, but it wasn't something that was really on everybody's mind. Again, like I said, I was the oldest. My mom had died whenever I was right after I turned 16. So there were a lot of other things that were more important at the time than me being, 19 years old and going in the Army and everything. It was just something that you did, to be quite truthfully. I mean, I wouldn't say it was necessarily an honor, but it was a duty, and I felt, hey, this is my country, so I don't mind serving. My dad had served, and so it was just something that was kind of taken for granted, at least in our family. So again, it's rural America, a little bit different maybe than bigger cities and different environments.
How about were a lot of your friends drafted at the same time?
There were quite a few that were in my high school class, or kids that I knew that got drafted. There were several getting drafted, and several of them ended up in Vietnam, definitely so too. But it was just something that for that part of America that it was a natural thing. There was a war going on. They needed people to be fighting over there and doing various jobs over there and to be in the service. And it was just something that if you didn't go to college, you were probably going to get drafted. And I don't know of anyone who ever avoided the draft by going to Canada or anything like that. So it was growing up in that generation that was very acceptable to be put into the service. Some guys would enlisted in the Navy, and some guys enlisted in the Air Force, but most guys were drafted, to be quite truthful.
Okay. What was the early days like when you left for training and that situation, and how did you adapt?
Training was again, like I said, when I was a kid, I was outside a lot. I hunted a lot, and there was always a lot of hard work on the farm. Okay, we milked cows, we put up hay, it was small grain. There was always a lot of work. So to be quite truthful, the training itself wasn't super difficult. I mean, before I went in the Army, I was like 185 to 190 pounds, and I had been doing a lot of partying because I knew I was going to go in the Army. So I was drinking a lot of beer, and it was one of those things. But I had done a lot of hard work, so going in the Army really wasn't that difficult. We went in, we took kind of, I wouldn't say aptitude tests, but tests on what do you like to do and what are you good at, and they, I think if I remember, I think we tested for like maybe 1 or 2 days, and then they would take the results of these tests and everything and kind of determine what you were going to do, but you didn't know that at the time. That came later on. But anyway, for the first part of the test, I tested out pretty good, and they ended up saying, well, we're going to make you a squad leader if you'd be interested. And I said, well, what's involved in that? They said, well, you wouldn't have to do KP and you won't have to do guard duty. You'll pick guys that'll do that. So I said, hey, I'm in. So we had like a 2-week leadership course, and we did all of the physical training beforehand and a lot of the drills and stuff like that. So we would be prepared because whenever we actually got into basic training, we'd have like 15 or 16 guys in your squad. And so anyway, I did that and got used to the physical training. And again, like I said, it really wasn't any harder work. But there was a lot of in the Army. They tear you down to build you back up. So there was a lot of discipline. You were always running from one place to another. I mean, there was no sympathy. Whenever we did get to basic training, and I was a squad leader. The drill sergeants were mostly Vietnam veterans that had come back, and so they were going to train you real hard because they knew what you had coming up, and so. Again, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say, there was a lot of browbeating. I mean, I never seen anybody none of the sergeants ever got physical with anybody, but they would be in your face and you were always on the go. And if you did something wrong, they let you know about it. And if you didn't do something wrong, they would let you know about it. Okay. So it was really a deal where whenever they said jump, you said how high, because that's kind of the military way of doing it. In other words, whenever we tell you to do something, do it without question. And so you learn to do that without question. But it was basically 7 days a week. You would get up. I think if I remember right, you had the option to go to church for maybe an hour on Sunday, but even Sundays were set for training. You would be up like at 5 in the morning, and you'd shower, and there would be a sergeant on your face. Shower, shave, get back to the barracks. We're out here in formation at 6:30. We're going to go eat. At 7:30, we're done eating. At 8 o'clock, we're heading out to training. And it was all very regimented, and you hustle from one place to another. And by hustling, it kept you in good shape. Before you could go into chow, you had to do overhead bars, okay? And you had to go all the way through the overhead bar line before you get in the chow line. So they did that. And again, I wouldn't say we ran, but we double timed the chow. We double timed back. Whenever you went in the mess hall, they'd say, put it in your mouth and swallow it. You can eat it when you get outside. And that was just one of those things. It was just run, run, run. And again, it was run and do what I say and do what I say right now. And so that built that up to you. I could remember some guy saying, "Oh, we went to the PX, blah blah blah." I don't ever remember going to the PX. I think our sergeants would get whatever we needed at the PX, and I don't really remember ever going to the PX. We generally had no days off. The only time we got, I think, in our fifth week, we were shooting. Our M14s for marksmanship training and everything. And if you shot expert, they would give you a 3-day pass. Okay, and that was the only 3-day pass that they gave out while I was there. And I shot expert, so I did get to go home after about the fifth week for Friday night, Saturday, and I had to be back in there by Sunday evening and everything, which was pretty good. But again, we had physical training all the time. We were always in marksmanship stuff. We learned the code of conduct, the military code of conduct, and the stuff that went through all that. Just a lot of training just shoved down your throat. And about the sixth week, then they got everybody together, and everybody got orders about where you were going to go for your advanced training. And the drill sergeants, they knew all of the MOSs, which are method of service. They knew it all. So, if you were blah, 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 you were going to be a combat engineer. If you were blah, 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 you were a medic school, you're going to Fort Sam Houston. Okay, or, I was infantry, and I said 11B20, and my drill sergeant said, "You're going to Vietnam." He said, and it was Fort Lewis, Washington, where I went for training. But these guys knew everything. And again, by about the fifth or sixth week, they had started to let up a little bit. They were constantly on you, but they were at the point where they'd already beat you down. We're starting to build you back up. And again, like I said, it was hard work. And for somebody who came in and was severely out of shape, it really tested everything they had. I mean, it really was. But I dropped like 25, 26 pounds. I think I was down to about 160 from the 188 or whatever whenever I went in. And I thought I was in pretty good shape at that point. And I was. But after basic training, then we went into advanced infantry training. I mean, we graduated in the morning from Fort Leonard Wood. I had a chance to say goodbye to my dad, who came down to see me graduate. And they put me on a bus, and we went to Lambert Airport in St. Louis, probably 100 of us. Okay, and they stuck us on planes. They already had our tickets and everything else, and stuck us on a plane and said, you're going to Fort Lewis, Washington. Mm-hmm. And so we flew the first time I ever been on a plane. Oh, it was growing up in a small town. The only time we ever got any place, we went down to St. Louis for the ball games once in a while, and I think we went to Chicago once for the FFA, which is Future Farmers of America, the International Livestock Exposition. Other than that, I probably never got out of probably a 360 square mile area in that. So never on a plane, never on a train, never on any of that stuff. But the train or the plane ride was really interesting. Boy, I tell you what, I didn't realize that you taxied down to the end of the airport or the end of the runway and then came back and flew. And we're going down there, and I thought, this plane's never going to get in the air. It just is not going fast enough. And when we get down the other end, and he turned around and he jammed those engines up about 2/3 of the way down there. I said, "Yep, this thing's going to get in the air," and it did. But it was really interesting. I mean, it's stuff I'd never seen before, and I could look outside because we were flying during the day, and it just amazed me. It was really neat. Then we flew into Seattle, and we flew over. I forget what the bay is out there, and it was just beautiful. It was dusk flying into SeaTac Airport in the Puget Sound is what it was, and it was just beautiful with the evergreen trees and everything there. And I thought the training was hard in basic. The training was hard in basic. The physical part of it was hard, and the mental part was hard. But out there for advanced infantry training, they did not browbeat us or anything like that, but the physical training was harder than what. But I was in pretty good shape, and we fired every type of weapon there was out there. And we were out again. This was the same thing, basically 6 to 7 days a week. Sometimes you would get a Sunday off, which was highly unusual. Never got a Sunday off in basic training, but this you did get a day off. But a ton of training and ambush preparation and grenades and every weapon that you could think of. And I mean, there was no doubt in our minds, because they never said, "Well, you're going to Vietnam," but that was the only thing we could be training for. And as soon as we got there, they started giving us shots every week. Boy, they'd line them up for the shots, and they'd have the air guns and everything. They said, "Now, whatever you do, stand there, relax, and don't move." And somebody would constantly move, and that air gun would rip you up and blood would be falling, and everybody be looking out the side of the line, and boom, somebody would faint or whatever. And the shots, gosh, they gave us shots for probably 5 or 6 weeks in a row. But you got everything. I mean, the Black Death and typhoid and diphtheria and you name it, every shot that was possible they were going to give you because they wanted you to be healthy whenever you're over there. I never gained any weight, never lost any weight while I was over there. But it was a more relaxed atmosphere. They were doing a lot of training, but they were not in your face. It was just quite a bit more, but a lot of physical training and a lot of camaraderie. You start meeting guys, and you knew that because everybody in this company and everybody in that company was in the infantry. You were going to be going to Vietnam probably, unless you already had a brother over there, which I didn't. So you got very close. They came and hey, would you like to go with the airborne? You get paid extra money to jump out of a plane, and I thought, oh, that's stupid. I am not jumping out of no dumb plane. So I didn't jump out of no dumb plane. But they had a couple guys went to NCO school that they were very good. They thought they would make good sergeants and stuff like that. 1 or 2 guys graded out very well, and they took them to warrant officer school for flying helicopters and stuff like that. But basically, most everybody there was for Vietnam. And about the 7th week, they gathered everybody together and started calling off names about where you were going. And needless to say, I think I heard 1 or 2 guys that were going to Germany, and that was because they had brothers already over there in Vietnam. And everybody else was going to Vietnam, and that was it. And it was one of those things that there wasn't anything you could do about it, and so you just kind of accepted it as it was. But it was also something that you're starting to, every time you read a paper, we didn't have any TVs or anything like that. So you get a paper or you hear some stuff like that. It was like, oh, wow, this don't sound too good. It was really, really starting to heat up over there big time. Especially with Tet had hit that in 1968. A lot of casualties, a lot of people getting shot up, a lot of stuff in the newspapers and stuff about that, and that had happened in February and March and April, and so that would have been about the time I was going in, but now it was starting to hit home on stuff like that. So it was just something that was a little scary, and but it wasn't anything to do about it. So graduated from AIT, Advanced Infantry Training, or Advanced Individual Training, and said, okay, you got 31 days to go home, and then you'll be back at the airport in St. Louis because we're going to fly you. So I went home for those 31 days and, saw everybody and did a lot of partying and had a good time. But I actually walked around the house and thought, this might be the last time I'll ever see this, and walked around the farm and stuff like that, because it really was starting to hit home then. And it was scary. It really was. But it was something that, well, there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm not going to run off to Canada. So 31 days later, I went down to the airport down in St. Louis. My dad took me and we got on a plane, and God, there was military guys all over the place, and you had your duffel bags, and we were dressed in khakis, and we flew into Travis Air Force Base, which is in California, and they put us up in a huge warehouse that had just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bunk beds. Okay, and you reported in, and they had you checked in, and you went, and they basically said find a bunk. Okay, there was no assigned seating or anything like that. They say, here's the bunks, there's the bathrooms over here, here's a place where you can get food, but you can't leave this place. You're here. And I'm sure it was that way. They had other warehouses or whatever like that. And then basically you waited there till they called your name. And I think I waited, I waited maybe a day and a half, and they called my name. And so went over, took my gear, and they put us in another holding area for just a few hours. And then at that point, they were hauling troops over to Vietnam on commercial airliners. And so I was assigned to Lady Bird Johnson's Flying Tiger Airlines. Lady Bird Johnson actually owned Flying Tiger Airlines, and they received money for sending troops overseas. So I was riding on her plane, and we were assigned to that. And we got on the plane, took off, flew to Anchorage, Alaska. Okay, rather it was not a straight flight over. And coming into Anchorage, Alaska, we were riding on a plane, and this was in 1968, and it was pretty primitive up there, still kind of primitive. And up there, whenever they had plane crashes and stuff like that, they just bulldozed the planes off to the side of the runway. So whenever we're coming in, there's all these planes and stuff that crashed. I thought, oh my God, this is a dangerous place to land. Here we are going to Alaska. And then, whenever we got there, they let us off the plane for about an hour and a half. And the first thing I did was I said, well, how come there's all the plane crashes? And they said, oh, that happens all the time. Some of those planes have been out there for years, and they just never cleaned them up. So anyway, we got there and got back on a plane, flew to Japan, was there for an hour, and then we landed in Vietnam. And landed in Vietnam, it left in October, so it was fall, this time of year, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, it'd be 45 years ago in about a week that I flew over there. And but it was cool, and the weather was beautiful and everything, and got off at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, I think, which is at Bien Hoa in Vietnam, and got off, and I mean, it was just like the middle of summer hits you when you got off the plane, and you could smell jet fuel, and other stuff burning. And it was just like, wow. I mean, the smell got you, the heat got you. It was just like, whew, it was kind of overwhelming. But they got you off the plane, put you in a holding area, okay, because they were going to take you and assign you to whatever infantry division or wherever was needed on something like that. You had no idea where you were going until you got into that. So they said, and it was kind of like the deal at the Travis Air Force Base. We'll have formation in the morning. Now, we didn't have formation at Travis Air Force Base. They just announced over loudspeakers because you were in the building. But here, they had you in formation, and they would call off names, and it would take them an hour to call off all the names. Okay, and if your name wasn't called, then you were assigned duty. And my first duty over there was burning crap, because your latrines were basically 50-gallon drums cut in half with handles welded on the side, and you use that to go to the bathroom in. And that stuff had to be burned once a day. So you'd take the barrels, two guys would take the barrels in your khakis, which are supposedly your dress uniforms, but that was all you had. So hoist that thing up there, and you put in 15 or 20 in the back of a truck. Then you get up there and they'd haul it out, and you dump it all out, and they'd throw diesel fuel on it and burn it. So we did that till about 1 o'clock, and then we went back and got something to eat. And 2 o'clock, they had another formation to call out names. Well, I had figured out that I wasn't going to be out there burning that stuff again. So I went behind the barracks and hid, because you could hear just as well behind the barracks as you could stand in formation. So I was there for 2 days, and finally my name was called. And, what they would do is they would say, for the 1st Infantry Division, then they would go down a list of however many names, American Division, however many names, 101st Airborne, however many names. And I was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division. So went there and went up country. And that was my arrival in Vietnam. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like it could have been pretty overwhelming.
It was very overwhelming. It really was. The Army, made me much more responsible, and Vietnam made me much more appreciative of things, because, I mean, boy, you're there, and I mean, things are so primitive. Again, like I said, that's what you do to keep things clean for your bathrooms, is you take it, you dump it, and you burn it. And so again, there are no niceties there, especially for infantry. I was in the infantry. There's no doubt in my mind that it can't get any worse than that. It really can't. But being there and the stuff that happened in the following year made me a better person, made me appreciate things, made me realize that, hey, there's enough that no matter the things that work and the other things that have happened, I look back and say, you know what, it could never, ever get that bad again. It could never get that bad again. And, really in burning that crap, I found out, later on, as you go through some of the stuff that, hey, I just hadn't been burning crap for a year or some of the other stuff I end up doing. It was just again a year where you appreciate things the rest of your life for what happens in that one year. It was just a it was a long year. That was the longest year of my life. Yeah, I got assigned to the First Infantry Division, 1st Battalion, 28th Infantry, and everything. And those guys become your family. And because it's not like here, oh, it's Friday, boy, I'm going to go home, we're going to have a beer, or I'm going to go home and not do anything for 2 days. Well, you don't. In the infantry, at least where I was at, it was 7 days a week, okay, 24 hours a day. And I literally mean it was 24 hours a day, because we would be out on search and destroys for 10, 12 days at a time. And you got one set of clothes for 10 or 12 days. They resupplied you after 4 or 5 days with sea rations. But you would literally patrol all day, you would ambush all night. You patrol all day, you'd ambush all night. You patrol all day, you ambush all night. 10th day, they'd pick you up in the morning, take you back to the base camp, which was probably not much bigger than this damn building. Okay. And put you in, give you a new shirt, give you a new pair of pants. You had no underwear. They didn't give you underwear. 2 pair of socks. Okay. And they would, you get a hot meal that night, and you were going to get breakfast the next morning. Okay. And then you were, like I said, you flew in, new clothes, quick shower, read your mail. Okay. Plug in the radio guys always had extra batteries, so you take transistor radios and you plug them to the batteries that are like this, so you get the music and everything. You read that, smoke a couple cigarettes, smoke cigarettes all the time, but and pull guard duty that night and around the perimeter, and the next morning you're back out for another 10 days. And so you not only lose track of what day it is, you lose track of what month it is. You don't know. There was no such thing as a Super Bowl. The World Series was going on whenever I went in, and I didn't find out who won the World Series for like 3 months. It's just you don't. There's no contact. There's nothing there. We were out one time. We come back in, and this time we walked in. Generally, you flew in on helicopters and flew out on helicopters, but we walked back in, and they figured I'd only been in country 2 months at that time. But we walked back in, and the guy says, and the company commander, he says, okay, get your clothes, and I forget, get your clothes, do something else, and then go over to the mess hall, and we got Thanksgiving dinner. And I remember somebody said, oh, I didn't know it was Thanksgiving. And the guy said, well, it's not. That was last week, but you guys still get your dinner. You have no idea. But so it just gets away from you. It really does. The only time I remember whenever we had Christmas, because we had Christmas, and whenever we went out on ambush, they said, don't shoot unless they shoot at you first. And I was like, wow, here it is, Christmas, and we're out here killing people, or possibly killing people. It was, it was supposed to be a ceasefire, but if they shoot at you, you go ahead and shoot at them. And I'm thinking, wow, man, there's something wrong with this, but it was. Luckily, we had a good guy, our good platoon sergeant was in. We were out on ambush that night. He said, "We're going out here to pull ambush where we're supposed to." He said, "But we're pulling way back off the trails," and said, which we did, but again, it's just something that those guys are your family, and after several months, you get a letter from home, and somebody say, "Hey, how's your dad doing?" And it's like, "What's he look like? What's my dad look like? I can't remember." And it was like, "Oh yeah, and you just it's what you do day in and day out and day in and day out, and you have guys you hang around with. Everybody in your platoon you're fairly close to. Some of the guys in your company you are, but basically it's your platoon, and then these guys, whenever their year's getting up, they're going, and then you got new guys coming in and everything. So it's a constant turnover, and you get to know these guys, you talk to them and everything, but you don't really get super close to them. You can get too close sometimes to people. So you don't get too close. Killing people is fairly easy. That's a shame to say that. But it is. But whenever you see guys you've known, whenever they get killed, that's tough. That's tough. I cried a lot over there, several times. But it was, there was nothing you could do about it. You act and you react and you just go on. And it's funny, we first got over there, and boy, the first 3 months we really were very little contact. It was just, we made contact a few times, and it was just you got to the point where, well, this isn't as bad as I've read about and thought about and everything else. And boy, after the first of the year, this was almost a full year after Tet, and so they knew Tet was probably going to happen again, or at least some version of it. So they tried to be a little proactive to it. So boy, after the first of the year, we started going out on patrols big time. And I mean to tell you, we really run into some nasty stuff at times. But when your time is up, your time is up. When you first get in, whenever you're first coming in to a company, you're always point man. When your platoon is on point, then you're the point man because you're the new guy. Okay, so you're always hoping there's another new guy coming in, so you don't have to walk point. So you got to walk point. But lucky, whenever I got there, I walked point for probably 6 weeks or whatever, and we hit minimal stuff, and so it was good. Here, new guy come in, and I said, "Oh man, am I glad to see you? You're the new point man." And he said, "Well, I thought the guys with the most experience did that." I said, "Nope." So anyway, we switched point man and everything, but make a long story short, we got a new guy come in, and he was a nice kid, and he was killed the first days in country, or first days in our outfit. Said, "You're the point man," and we were giving him a bunch of crap. Said, "Oh, you'll be glad when the new guy comes in." Well, he wasn't around long enough for the new guy to come in. And I don't know whether if you're going to get killed, it's best to get killed early or it's best to get killed late. The longer you're there, and I was never wounded. I was very fortunate. But the longer you're there, the more you're worried about, oh, wow, I've only got, you get 8 or 9 months, you say, I only got 4 months to go. I only got 3 months to go. And it's just like you start looking over your shoulder. I know one guy he just was a nervous wreck. He got so close and so short, and he made it out all right, but he was so scared. He was terrible scared. And it was constantly on his mind. And you were always scared, but there were times whenever you were more scared than others. When if you're under a mortar attack and you're out in the middle of the jungle, there's no place to hide. There's no bunkers to jump into, and it's like, oh God, am I going to have an airburst? And you're laying on the ground with your hands trying to protect your neck, and you're thinking the worst possible scenario. This thing's going to go over right on top of my head and whatever. So you're always scared. And in the middle of a firefight, you're not so much scared as you're trying to survive, and then whenever it's all done and over with, then you're really scared. And we started hitting a bunch of this stuff after January because we were constantly patrolling, and we were constantly in firefights, and we constantly blow ambushes, and and we patrol here, and my God, there was just it was just a lot of contact. And good guys get killed, and the nicest guys in the world are the ones that seem like they get killed, and some guy you really don't care for, he's never has a problem, you know. And but again, like I said, you know, if it's not a new guy like this Gary Coyle was, yeah, it was on point. You know, some of the other guys you knew had been there. You knew their family. Hey, this guy's from Texas, you know, and you know, his mom and dad, and he's got two sisters and that, and he's never had a girlfriend, and you know, and then this other guy he's also from Texas, and he's the platoon sergeant, and he's got a kid, and he's been married 3 years now, and he's going to make a career of it. And he don't make a career of it. And the other guy from Texas, he don't get home to see mom and dad. And you think about that stuff, and you say, "Oh, what's their family going through?" Whenever it did get bad, which it did get bad with that, there was a lot of people killed. And my dad said, after a while, he said I quit watching TV. He said I just couldn't watch it anymore. So it was tough on people back home too. But I think I sat down one time and figured it out. In the year I was over there, it was like 37 guys a day were getting killed. Not a month, not a week, but 37 a day. Every day it averaged out 37 a day. And I think that was between 13 and 14,000 guys in that year, just the year I was over there. You know, and I'm not downplaying Iraq or Afghanistan or anything like that, but look at the total number of people that have been killed there versus what was killed there in a year. It was a lot more flesh and bone against flesh and bone, you know. And you know, you kind of hate the soldiers on the other side, but after you've been there a while and you realize they're just soldiers like you are, they're just taking orders and doing stuff like you are, you know. And it doesn't mean you don't stop killing them. It just means you don't hate them, I guess, more than anything else. Yeah. It's soldiers have respect for other soldiers, I think. Yeah. So.
Wow. So you were there in Vietnam about a year?
Exactly 1 year.
Exactly one year.
Yeah, like October 4th of 68 through October 3rd, I think, of 69. Yep.
And then you made your way back to the States?
Made our way back to the States, and boy, it was great. Before I went on R&R to Australia in like the 9th or 10th month I was in country. And they before you go, they weigh you and check everything and check your teeth and everything. And I weighed 128 pounds. So I said, that can't be right. And the guy said, that's 128 pounds. I said, oh, that surely can't be right. And it was. But, you know, you were carrying stuff all day. C rations were basically all we ever had. I mean, you ate a ton of C rations. You walked all day, regardless whether it's hot, what it was. But you were just in real good shape and everything. But went on R&R and come back, and I was getting ready to go back on the field, and I think this was right at the end of my 10th month. And they said, oh, you don't have to go back out in the field. I said, well, why not? And they said, well, we got a job for you here in the rear. I said, oh, really? And it was great. So I was kind of in the administrative end of it, driving Jeep and stuff like that for the last 2 months in country. And God, that was great. You slept on a cot, you know, and you got food whenever you wanted it, you know, and you wore your uniform for a couple of days, and then they give you a clean uniform, and you just, wow, it was hard to believe. I mean, it was really great, you know. And you go down and you could get a beer, okay, or you could get a couple beers or whatever. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was like you went from, I don't know, to heaven. I mean, and maybe not from hell, but to heaven. I mean, it was just so nice, you know. And then a week before we got ready to fly out, they said, okay, here, grab all your stuff. Here's your orders. Go back down to Benoit. Okay, and they put you in a holding company for guys going home. And so some of the guys that had been there whenever I flew in, or whenever we trained together, you know, we you saw these guys, you know, and you know, and some of them, you know, would say, hey, how's so and so? Well, you know, Cruz, he got hit real early, you know, when they sent him back to the States, you know, and so and so, well, he got killed, you know, and you know, and so, no, I hadn't heard anything from him, and you know, some guy said, well, you know what, I saw this guy like 6 months ago, you know, what over here or whatever, and so you don't know what you found out what happened to some of them, and you didn't find out what happened to a lot of them, and it always does. You know, you're always a little bit curious, you know, and so, you know, over the years I've checked the wall to see if there, you know, this name or that name is on there, and sometimes you run into the name, and a lot of the other times you don't, so which is a good thing.
Now, did you make any friendships that have lasted?
No, I never did. Not really. I mean, you know, I knew a lot of guys, and I could tell you stories about, you know, about 50 guys, but I can't. But none of them, you know, again, a few guys after I was back, because I had like 5 months left, in back in the States, and you know, run into a couple of guys out in Fort Riley, Kansas, and everything, and stuff like that. But never anything like that. No, it's just I think the Army was a little bit different than the Air Force and the Navy on something like that, because on a ship, you know, those guys that were in the Navy were in generally for 4 years. Okay. And the same with the guys in the Air Force. They were in for 3 and 4 years, and the units moved together. Okay. Where I was at, again, you were there for a year, and the guys that had been there, you know, 11 months before you got there, they were shipping out whenever you got in, and I was coming in to take their place. And then the guys that had been there, you know, a month later, they were shipping out, and new guys were taking their place. So I knew those guys for 2 months, and then I might know the next batch for 3 months, and the next batch for 4 months. So you didn't make a lot of it, and it was, I don't know, it was just something that you didn't. Again, you just you were close, but you didn't want to get super close too on something like that. But no, none. Again, like I said, I can name you a bunch of names. But yeah, guys.
Let's see. What about? I know you've had some medals and citations I saw on your form. What were those about?
Combat Infantryman's badge. Once you, if you're in the infantry, and I think there might be other MOSs that it might apply to too. But after your first firefight, you get that. Okay. And Bronze Stars, everybody got a Bronze Star. I don't know of anybody who didn't get a Bronze Star for meritorious service, but I also got 2 for V for valor. But you know, it was just stuff that happened, and you know, it's not a big deal. Air medal, most of the time whenever we go out, we fly out in helicopters in groups of 5, and you come in, and they would basically aerial assault you into where you were going to be patrolling. Okay, and then they would take you out, and I think after you did that for 6 months in a row or whatever, then you got the air medal on something like that. And then actually the Vietnam stuff was just for being over there. You get those medals just for being in country more than anything else.
Okay. What rank did you achieve?
Specialist 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, how much longer did the war go on after you left Vietnam?
Well, I think if I remember right, I got out there in '69, and I think it didn't get resolved till 1973. So it went on for another 4 years. But whenever I was getting ready to leave, that's whenever they were starting to withdraw some of the troops from Vietnam. Okay, yeah. While I was over there, I think there was, I forget what, 500,000 troops or something like that, or more than I can't remember. I don't know. Again, it's just like some of the operations. They say, well, you know, what operations were you in? Well, you know, they didn't have. I mean, other than Hamburger Hill or their Drang Valley or some of the Marine Corps stuff up north, a lot of those battles didn't have any. You know, they were missions or whatever you want to call them, and they really were not anything that stuck in anybody's mind. So I really can't remember. I mean, I was never in Hamburger Hill, and I was never in Drang Valley, and I just can't tell you what the name of them were. I mean, if you could go back to the archives, they would say, well, this was so and so, and this was so and so, and this was so and so. And yeah, were we in part of them? Absolutely. But what they were, I don't know. And they were, I wouldn't say that they're insignificant. They're just not remembered.
Yeah. Yeah. So you came back to the States, finished out your
Mm-hmm.
your contract.
Yeah.
And then where did you go after you were released?
Well, whenever I got out, we had whenever I always thought I was going to farm or whatever, but we didn't own any ground. We just rented, and it got to be pretty expensive. And so my dad got out of the farming while I was in the Army. And so whenever I got back home, me and a buddy of mine who went in at the same time, he was in the combat engineers, but he never went to Vietnam. But our birthdays were the same day, and he was a year younger than me. So, we both got out at the same time. So we started putting in applications. We put in applications at AC up here and Firestone over in Decatur and up in Peoria. And about every 2 weeks, we go back and fill out resumes again, looking for jobs. And there just weren't a lot of jobs back then. I'm not exactly sure what the deal was, but we did this for 6 months, and I was working out of work part-time out of the Union Hall, carrying bricks or helping a guy farm or whatever, just trying to pick up some odd money here and there and everything. And one day my brother, he got he was still in high school, or he just got out of high school, and he got a thing that said, could become a computer expert, and he didn't really want it. He said, so hey, why don't you look at this? So I looked at it and it said VA approved, which meant when you went to school, they would pay you money to go to school for that. So I thought, oh, yeah, you know what? My unemployment's about running out. I'll take this until this course is over, till I find some type of work or whatever. Well, I got into computers and I liked it, and I was very good at it. And that was back in, like I said, that was back in 1970 when I first started going to school at the end of the year. And I got into IBM stuff, and I made a computer career for 35 years. I was the IT manager out here at the State Retirement System for about 16 years. So yeah, so it really worked out good for me. That training, again, it was VA approved, and again, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I went to computer school, met my wife there at computer school. So, and we've been married 41 years now, and just you never know. I mean, but so good things come out of bad things and everything. You have to look at it that way. But it was, again, it's always made me appreciate life. Gosh, nothing could ever be as bad as some of the stuff that went through there. There is just no way. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you how your services affected your life, but you've kind of already talked about that quite a bit. And I know you learned a lot of life lessons in your service in that. So are there any other last comments or anything you'd like to share?
No, I mean, again, I was lucky. The service did turn out to be a good thing for me, and it could have turned out to be a bad thing for me. I would just happen to, it wasn't and it has nothing to do with skill or anything like that. I was just very fortunate that I came out like I am. I don't think I have any mental problems with that. I know a few guys that really affected them really a lot. I used to have, maybe for a year, I used to have some bad dreams and stuff like that. And every once in a while, not very often, rarely, but every once in a while I'll dream about it. But it's nothing really bad. The first year it was off and on there for a while. You'd have some dreams and you just wake up and it's just like, okay, I'm here. But those are things, and like I said, but I don't think I have any psychological problems. I really don't, not with that. But I feel sorry for those that do, because some people, again, and it has, it doesn't mean I'm better than they are or they're worse than I am. I was just more fortunate than they've been in that aspect of it.
Well, thank you so much. You have just opened up and shared quite a lot, and I really enjoyed hearing your story. And thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Most of all.
You're welcome.
So